Hi, welcome to my video. This video is about our vacation and the sights and sounds last fall to this beautiful island in Virginia that we've never been to before. There was so much beauty here, the weather was perfect, and wildlife and nature galore. Hope you like it.
Yeah, we usually do pretty good. I started putting that in the steamer on this summer. We went through a 70-day drought. I know. And whenever it gets really, really dry, we sometimes have trouble seeing the ponies out there. The king stud himself, Riptide, right on.
That just means if you come running back here, 40-second potty problems, I don't have 40-second potty solutions. My solutions are up to 5-minute variety. Is everybody cool with that? Yeah. Awesome. So I've got a few maps stashed around the boat that you guys might be able to see here. There's one on the bow of the boat and one on each of the side gates. We just left the dock on that map and launched to the area where we spotted that unique bird sighting we've been having now for a couple of weeks, the flamingo. So we've got a pink flamingo that's in our area, not supposed to be here. Showed up around October 2nd, October 4th, and we've been seeing it pretty regular, right at the bottom of the number 12 on that. So where the yellow line kind of goes around the number 12 and it tapers off at the bottom. That's where we've been seeing that flamingo pretty regularly there. So we're going to head up into that area and see what we find and see where we go from there. We do have about a 50-50 shot of spot dolphin.
Release mud under the water from the state to grow oysters since about 1860 or 1870. If you had an oyster lease out here in the middle of nowhere, late 1800s, early 1900s, there's a decent chance you didn't own a motorized boat. And even if you did, it probably wasn't real fast. So when the guys would come out to work their oyster beds, they planned to be out here for several days, maybe a week at a time. So they built these cabins in the marsh right next to their oyster beds, and that's where they would sleep at night, where they would shelter from the weather, and when they leave, they keep an armed guard inside there to make sure that nobody stole from them while they weren't around.
on the bottom.
But yeah, so they would hand harvest. So he'd go out at low tide, wait for those oysters to expose to the open air, and then he'd pick them up by hand. So the larva wants to set on something, anything. Bottom of my boat, a piling, marsh grass. It needs a substrate to stick to, but it's predisposed to stick to another out with a hammer, and you call through that conglomerated mass. You knock loose shell off, you knock the small oysters off so they keep growing, then you tap the big one to make sure it's got something in it, and then you put it in your basket. So this was a different mechanism here. They didn't do tongs a whole lot. Industry economy continued to increase in our area when it started to collapse in the Chesapeake Bay, where there was more dredging that was going on there. Right. Here there was, and I don't want to paint it with a negative brush, but there was a bit more kind of stewardship, right? Like that was your bed, right? So you wanted to make sure it was always doing well. You didn't want to over harvest. You didn't want to drag a cage through it or anything like that. Now, are you guys all familiar with the idea that all the ponies have names out here? You guys know that? Well, some yes, some no. So the ponies have been named out here since the late 80s, early 90s. And the reason they have names, our volunteer fire company owns the ponies, and they sell the foals each year to bring in money for the fire company to buy fire trucks and ambulances. 80% of their operational budget comes from selling the foals of these ponies at the auction each year. But they're not allowed to have any more than 150 ponies out here. That's by decree from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who now own the land that the ponies are on out here. Well, long story short, we've always called these guys Chincoteague ponies, but they weren't really a real breed, because breeds are driven by paperwork, registries, and pedigrees. So the fire company in the late 80s, early 90s says if the only thing that's keeping these guys from being a real breed is some paperwork, let's do the paperwork. So they created a registry. But to maintain a registry, that meant they had to have unique identifiers for every creature in the registry. So in the late 80s, the volunteer fire company just makes up names for all the ponies out here. They do a couple different things to tell one from the other, and then by the mid-90s, they decide to do what they still do today, which is microchips. So I know Ajax, he's the stallion of this band, so then that leads me down the path to some of the other ponies that are in his group. Pony second from the far left, that's either going to be Surfette or Smooch. It's a real dark, kind of a liver chestnut with a blonde mane and tail, kind of a dirty blonde mane and tail on the far left there. Pony far left is most likely Poco Latte. Then we've got Freckles, Bada Bing, group in there with Ajax. I'm thinking it's maybe Wildest Dreams, and I don't know who the other one is. The almost completely white pony with a brown head, that's Heidi, Heidi Sky. And then, so the last two to the right, the other one that's almost completely white is Thunderstorm Skies. And the pony on the far right, I think that's Splash of Freckles that's over there. Or I'm sorry, second from the far right. Very far right is Cheyenne. Oldest pony in our entire herd is the pony to the complete far right. Cheyenne, they sometimes call her half and half. Her front half is white, her back half is brown, and she has a brown head. She's 24 years old this year. We usually tell folks that kind of the average lifespan in the wild is like around 20 years old. So being 24, you know, it's kind of exceptional, you know, on the high end. Wild Thing, and then about 3 years before Wild Thing passed away, she jumped ship and she got in a band with a stallion by the name of Chief. Chief and Wild Thing, they're kind of like the Jets and the Sharks, right? You know, they kind of have overlap in their territory. So the idea that she moved from one band to another, it's like she didn't leave town. She was still like in her same neighborhood, in her same town. She was just with another band. Another member of Wild Thing's band had left his group and joined Chief's group a few years prior to that, a mare by the name of Cody. So Cody and Two-Letter Star both left Wild Thing and were with the stallion Chief. Wild Thing just passed away last year. Around this time last year, he would have been 25. So he was older. Is that our eagle making noise? Yeah. And when Wild Thing passed away, he had one mare left in his band, a mare by the name of Summer Breeze. Summer Breeze ended up joining Chief's band. And I tell the story in that, like, I don't know that necessarily Chief, wanted her or didn't want her in the band, but I think the reason she got in the band is because two of her friends from her other group were in there, and she was still in the same neighborhood that she'd always lived in. So it's not like she moved away. She ended up, moving in with some friends. It was just sort of a different vibe. So the nesting, I don't believe they actually nest right here. From what I understand, if you head south of here, if you go across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel to the south, as you leave Cape Charles, when you pay your fee for the toll on the bridge, you drive over a small bridge that lands on a little island, and then you go on the larger bridge. That little island's called Fisherman's Island, and it's a wildlife refuge, and it's a brown pelican nesting site. So brown pelican, I think, come up from further south to nest there, do all their nesting behavior, and then I think it's after that nesting behavior kind of all clears up, that's when we start to see more pelican activity in our area, like around early July, something like that. Like if we happen to see pelican here in May and June, it's normally just a couple of them, like maybe 1 to 3 of them, something like that, and they're not here regularly. You just see them on one warm day, and then they go back down south. And my theory is, which I make a lot of this stuff up, my theory is that those are the pelicans that aren't nesting, and they're tired of hanging out with their friends that are always talking about the egg. Come over and see the egg. We're tired of looking at your egg. We're going to go to Chincoteague for a few days, see the sights, and then we'll check you guys out when we get back.
Some of these little cabins look really nice.
Yeah, so this one here on our left, it was actually, they did a dramatic rebuild of this one about 3 or 4 years ago. The reason these things can be out here is because they're grandfathered in. They predate wetlands laws. Like if you wanted to build one out here today, no way would you be able to do that. And while they might not notice it in the moment, now it's satellites, but it used to be like USGS would do flyovers and pictures of the coastline, and in 15 years they might discover that you built a cabin where there shouldn't be one out there. What these guys did here, and I don't know how legit it is, I don't care, I don't think it's a big deal, but the original cabin was to the right of this cabin, and the pilings started to rot, and the whole thing started to collapse. So what they did is they drove new pilings into the marsh behind the old cabin, and then they built a new cabin behind the old cabin and tore the old cabin down. Now, they're not really trying to have something they never had, they're just sort of trying to preserve what they did have, and it's a little off the footprint where it originally was. Now, I'm sure like the Wetlands Board would have these people crucified for that, but in my mind, it doesn't really look like that big a deal,
If they're wiped out by a storm, can they rebuild?
So there was one that we kind of went by in the distance around the corner down there where there was a lot of new lumber on it, and a portion of the cabin was collapsed. Hurricane Sandy had destroyed, it was a regular gable-style roof, and Hurricane Sandy destroyed one half of the cabin, and the guys, the weight of the roof, oh, he's flying. The weight of the roof started to drag the whole thing down in 1987, and as an older teenager, the older teenagers would always hang out on Maddox Boulevard up past Depot Road, outside of the town limits, where the town police officers had no jurisdiction out there. We're so far north in both the county and the state, you rarely ever see county sheriff's deputies and state police officers in our area, because we have our own police force, and we're so far north in both the county and the state. So the teenagers were crossing across Hazard County line, hanging out on the beach road there, Roscoe and Enos, couldn't follow across
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe.